service, it may be based on employee training, it may be based on research, a lot of things. I mean, there are all kinds of things you're trying to do to make that moat bigger and bigger and to throw more piranha and crocodiles and et cetera into the moat. And you need a moat in business to protect you from some guy who's going to come along and offer it for a penny cheaper. That's what we're looking for all the time. And you can't find it all. You're not going to find it in carbon steel. You're not going to find it with an integrated oil company or something of the sort in all likelihood. But you will find it. You don't have to find very many. Very few. If you have 10 good ideas in the rest of your life, that you can afford to give away 5 of them because you'll get very rich with a very few good ideas.
Each year, the Berkshire Hathaway annual report is eagerly awaited by shareholders. That's because Mr. Buffett writes it himself. Part of the report, the chairman's letter, has become a widely cited source of business advice. In fact, the entire report is so readable that it's cited as a model for how financial reports should be written. In this next segment, we'll hear about Mr. Buffett's views on clear writing, we'll hear about why he thinks Berkshire Hathaway may be less successful in the future, and we'll hear his views on inherited wealth.
If you understand an idea, you can't express it so other people understand it. It's interesting, right? I find that every year when I write the report. I mean, I hit these blocks, and the block isn't because, I've run out of words in the dictionary. The block is because I haven't got it straight in my own mind yet. And there's nothing like writing to force you to think and get your thoughts straight. And if you want to communicate something to other investors, co-owners, or whatever it may be, it's quite possible to do it. I mean, I think based on what Chairman Levitt said, I think you're going to probably see a lot of improvement in that area. Same thing goes for accounting footnotes. I mean, I get accounting footnotes that I have trouble understanding. Well, the reason I have trouble understanding is the person that wrote it didn't want me to understand it. I mean, it's not impossible to write a footnote explaining deferred acquisition costs and life insurance, whatever you want to do. You could write it so people can understand it. And if it's written so you can't understand it, I am very suspicious. I mean, I probably won't invest. Well, I won't invest in the company where I can't understand a footnote because I know they don't want me to understand it. The greater the amount of capital we work with at Berkshire, the worse we are going to do in terms everything else being equal in terms of percentage returns on equity. And I've been telling our shareholders that for years. And the reason is very simple. That when I started out with $10,000, any security in the United States that I could find that would seem cheap could have a very significant impact on that amount of capital. Now, if we find something we can put $100 million in and we make 50%, that's $50 million pre-tax. It's about $32.5 million after tax, and that's 0.3% on net worth. So it takes very big ideas to have an impact, and our universe of potential investments has shrunk, or businesses that we can buy outright, has shrunk as our capital gets greater. We are down to where our universe is very, very small, and our returns cannot be as good in the future as in the past. When I started out, I went through Moody's and Standard & Poor's page by page. Every page, I just looked at companies, and I found Western Insurance Securities selling at 2 times earnings, or National American Insurance selling at 2 times earnings. I found a public utility in Genesee, New York, selling at less than 2 times earnings. That was just by turning the pages. But I could only put $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000 in those things. They still had the capacity maybe to double my net worth or something of the sort, or more than that maybe. But that'd be useless for me to do that now at Berkshire. So a lot of money is a drag, but it has other advantages.
I've read that you're not going to burden your children with the fortune that you've amassed.
That's not the word they use, but you've got the idea.
I was just wondering, to that extent, could you lend some words of wisdom about family and disciplining children with money?
Well, my general belief is if you've got a lot of money, that you should probably, and I got this idea, this phrase from somebody else, but that you should leave your children enough money so they can do anything, but not enough so they can do nothing. And I think that there's probably a certain social justice in that. I think, and on top of that, I happen to think it's probably, in aggregate, it's probably best for development of individuals, although there could be lots of exceptions to that. But I have used the analogy that, I run into people all the time, at the country club who say, isn't it terrible that these people are on welfare, and that they get food stamps, and then that just creates a cycle of dependency, and then you get second-generation welfare recipients because they were used to getting the food stamps from the welfare officer before, and they never stop to think that maybe inherited wealth is really just a lifetime supply of food stamps, given through a trust officer instead of a welfare officer. They never think about the debilitating effect of that, that waking up at age 10 seconds and finding out that you never have to work. Compare that to somebody that's probably got a couple of kids that they don't know what to do with and have plenty of problems of their own and are struggling, and they say, well, we're going to ruin this poor person's desire to work if we don't if we give them something to let them buy a little food. I personally think that society is responsible for a very significant percentage of what I've earned. I mean, if you stick me down in the middle of Bangladesh or Peru or someplace, you'll find out how much this talent is going to produce in the wrong kind of soil, and I will be struggling 30 years later. So society, I work in a market system that happens to reward what I do very well, disproportionately well. But so does, Mike Tyson did too. I mean, if you can knock a guy out, in 10 seconds and earn $10 million for it, this world will pay a lot for that. If you can bat 360, this world will pay a lot for it. If you're a marvelous teacher, this world won't pay a lot for it. If you're a terrific nurse, this world will not pay a lot for it. Now, am I going to try and come up with some comparable worth system that somehow distributes that? No, I don't think you can do that. But I do think that when you're treated enormously well by this market system, or in effect, the rest of society showers goods and services, or the ability to buy goods and services on you because of some peculiar talent. Maybe your adenoids are a certain way, so you can sing and everybody will pay you enormous sums to be on television or whatever. I think society's should have a big claim on that. If you're lucky enough to be the child of somebody in that position, I think cutting them off with zero is probably a mistake, but I think that setting them up so that essentially they've got this lifetime supply of claims on other people's production of goods and services in society for the rest of their life, it doesn't make much sense to me. My kid will be glad to come and rebut this next week. Will it?
I hope you've enjoyed our visit with Warren Buffett. His folksy wisdom is packed with shrewd advice. Maybe you can use some of it in building your own fortune. I'm David Hartzell. Thank you for watching.
Funding for this program is made possible in part by Wachovia Corporation, an interstate bank holding company serving regional, national, and international markets, and parent to the Wachovia Banks and Wachovia Investments Incorporated. And by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
This is PBS.